So part 2 is picking up after those eyebrows have been painted and the paint has cured fully. Now we're going to get ready to root on top of those painted eyebrows for added definition and realism. So with that first painted layer cured in place, I'm going to go back and root over these painted eyebrows. So on the left side, I've already rooted. On the right side, we just have the painted brows. So I'm going to show you how I root my eyebrows for added definition. The first thing we're going to want to do is get the vinyl nice and hot. So I'm going to heat up my sock and use that to warm the head so that we can make our holes as small and as clean as possible when we root. Okay, so we've got our hot rice sock inside the head. We put it face down so that the heat will go down into the face. So that's the area that we're going to be rooting. Okay, I'm going to get her positioned. For the purposes of this exercise, I will be using a 42 gauge regular needle. Actually, this is a crown, sorry, there's only one barb on each side. So 3 barbs all together. It's nice and tiny because I don't want to make great big holes in the vinyl. And I'm using some super fine premium mohair in jet black because that's the color that the doll's hair is going to be. I'm just going to pull the curl out of it. This isn't really necessary, but I find it easier to see and easier to work with when the hair is straight. We're going to be rooting from the middle, so the cuticle doesn't matter for this exercise. I'm just going to find a nice spot in the middle to make my loop. And now starting at the edge of the eyebrow, we're going to do that middle section. And I'm going to root it 1 loop at a time. Now, when you're rooting eyebrows, it's very important to angle the needle as flat as possible. So you don't want to be so flat that you're going in one end of the vinyl and coming out on top again, but you do want it to be so flat that the hair lays down. Now what you'll notice is even though I'm rooting a loop, which is technically putting 2 hairs in each hair plug, this needle is cutting the hair, so I'm actually only getting 1, which is very convenient. Depending on the thickness of your eyebrows, you can determine how many hairs you want on that middle line. But I'm basically just rooting right over what I painted, very carefully aiming the hair to lay as flat as possible. And making sure that I only get 1 in each hair plug. The eyebrows will be sealed from both sides. So on the outside, we're going to seal it with a varnish. On the inside, we're going to seal it with glue. So these things are definitely not coming out. And we shouldn't be getting water or moisture entrapment in them either. So here is our completed middle line. I just used a little bit of water on my finger to lay the hairs down. Now I'm going to take a little bit more water and use it to push the hairs out of my way. Because the next thing we're going to root is the bottom brow. So I don't want to catch or get tangled up in that center line. Okay, so I'm going to grab my loop again. Fold it neatly in half. I'm going to get my tiny needle. And we're going to do the same thing. Now this time I not only want it to be flat, but I want it to be angled in the direction that we painted the eyebrow, which as you recall from earlier, is going to change ever so slightly as we make our way around the eye. So here we go. Be very careful not to come back out through the eyelid, because that's kind of gross and awful. Okay, so you can see right here, it's almost coming out. We don't want to do that. And this is probably one of the most challenging sections of the root for that reason, because it is just so easy to go all the way through. Okay, so her mommy wants fine eyebrows. I accomplished that both through the selection of mohair, which is yearling mohair. It's very tiny hair diameter, and I'm spacing them out. So I'm not putting a whole lot of layers of hair here, nor am I putting them very close together. If you want a fuller eyebrow, you can do more layers. And that's just the sound of something that I'm curing, wrapping up in the oven. Rotate the head as you go so you're always aiming your needle in the right direction. And you can always go back and add more hair. So once you see what it looks like, if you're feeling like it's a little too thin, it's always better to add more later than have to pluck out what you put in. Because when you pluck, you're going to leave an empty hole behind, and that sometimes can be pretty visible. So we want to avoid pulling out hair as much as possible. Okay, notice I'm still holding my needle at a very shallow angle, but aiming each hair in the direction that we both drew and painted. It's also a good idea to root slowly. If you notice, my needle speed is significantly lower than how I normally root because I want my holes to be smooth and neat. Sometimes when you root really fast, you can carve up the vinyl in the process. We don't want that. So really just take your time adding each individual hair and making sure that you're only getting one in each hair plug. Once again, I'm using water to get the hairs that I've already rooted out of my way. Now I'm going to reposition the head so that we can start adding our top brow. Okay, so I'm going to line up my barbs. I'm going to grab a loop and start rooting the pattern that we painted. Still holding my needle at a very shallow angle so that those hairs are going to lay down flat. And this side is easier because you're on the top of the brow bone, so you don't have to worry about coming out on the other side of the eye because you're aiming your needle in the direction of the brow bone. So the ends of this hair is just going to be in the forehead, which works very well for sealing. So now that we've rooted our eyebrow, it's time to trim it up. And my favorite tool for trimming eyebrows is actually an eyebrow trimming set. So that's fun, right? All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do, just like we were cosmetologists, is brush the eyebrows up. Then we're gonna use our tiny little nippers to trim it down. And these things are great for this because you really have to get under these tiny hairs. So I'm going to start off leaving them a tad long. And incrementally keep nipping them down until we have the length that we want. Okay, so there's my first round of trimming. If you're using a cheap mohair, it's not going to tolerate being shorter than 1/4 of an inch, so it's going to want to stick up. If you're going to seal the eyebrows anyway, that's okay. But on a Reborn doll, you want to leave the eyebrows just slightly longer than you would on yourself. One thing that I love so much about painting the eyebrows before you root them is you really get so much depth. So the paint does what the hair wouldn't do. It adds fullness, while the hair adds dimension. So it just looks really nice and natural. So now we're ready to seal our eyebrow. Up until now, I've been working on her upside down because that makes it easier for me to see the curvature of the brow bone. But now that we're sealing, we're gonna place each hair where we ultimately want it to be. I want to look at her head on. It also helps if you put your eyes in so you can see where the eyebrows should be. But for this one, I didn't do that. So a lot of people that you'll see on the internet use matte varnish for their eyebrows. The problem with matte varnish, besides the fact that it doesn't always dry clear, is that it gets crunchy. So when you build it up too thick, it creates a layer that will flake off. So we don't want it to do that in our eyebrows. So I like to use the thick medium extender because it does dry clear. It creates a nice smooth surface and it's not going to get crunchy. If you're worried about the eyebrow becoming glossy, you can always go over it later with a thin layer of varnish. So I have not yet sealed the paint on this doll. So if the eyebrows do start to pick up shine, I can take care of that when I go back and seal. So I have a shader here that actually got a little bit of glue in it, so it's kind of stiff. You can also use a clean finger for this. I'm just going to glob the medium on the hair, brushing the hair in the direction that I both painted and rooted it. So I'm starting at the bottom. So the shorter you cut your hairs, the more medium it's going to take to hold them down. Like matte varnish, if you mess with it long enough, thick medium will start to get crunchy. So make sure you scrape those crunchies off before you put your doll in the oven. Now the eyebrows have been cured and had time to cool. So during the cooling process, I felt like I needed a little bit more hair on this right eyebrow. So I went ahead and added that. And now we need to trim it to blend in with the rest of the brow. And we want to keep checking our piece to make sure the eyebrows are both neat and even. So we have a few stragglers on this side and we have the hair I just rooted on this side. So we're going to do another, heavens, what in the world? Anyway, another layer of the thick medium extender to make sure all of that's going to lay down neatly. Once you're satisfied with your eyebrows, put them in the oven at 250 degrees for 10 to 15 minutes. You'll need the extra time for the thick medium to cure fully. Yes. The alternative to sealing your eyebrows would be to just let them hang loose. Just root them and let them be the way they are. If you've done a really good job of rooting them directionally, they'll stay relatively neat and fall into place. I hope that this has been a helpful tutorial for you, and I hope that you're able to create gorgeous baby eyebrows of different fullness and shapes and colors to really give your Reborn baby dolls that extra lifelike touch. So that's a little bit of elf magic for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and share with your friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye!